He never looked me in the eyes. Not once during the entire 20-minute appointment that would change everything. The first thing he did was sigh. The kind of sigh that sounds less like breathing and more like a verdict being handed down in a courtroom where I never got to speak. His pen clicked 3 times before touching the paper, like a judge tapping the gavel. Click, click, click. Each sound was a period at the end of my humanity. I sat there on that exam table covered in crinkly paper that announced every nervous shift, half dressed in a paper gown that opened in the back, half covered in shame that had been building for decades. "You've really let yourself go," he murmured, eyes tracing the numbers on his computer screen, the chart in his hands, the floor tiles, anywhere but my face. I wanted to tell him that I hadn't let myself go, that I had held myself together through divorce, through depression, through the death of my mother, that this body had carried me through storms he'd never see documented in any medical chart. But my voice stayed behind my ribs, trembling, invisible, caught between years of learning that contradicting a doctor makes you difficult. In that room with its fluorescent lights and anatomical posters, I wasn't a person. I was a number on a BMI chart, a cautionary tale, a problem to be solved before lunch. And the worst part wasn't what he said. I'd heard versions of it my whole life. The worst part was what he refused to see, my humanity, sitting right there in a paper gown, waiting to be acknowledged. Waiting for someone with an MD after their name to treat me like I mattered beyond the number on the scale. I used to believe that doctors healed people, that hospitals were sanctuaries, sterile, yes, but safe. Places where the Hippocratic Oath meant something more than words recited at graduation. I grew up watching ER and Grey's Anatomy, thinking that's what medicine looked like. Passionate people who cared, who saw patients as puzzles worth solving, who stayed up nights worried about the people in their care. Then I learned that healing has nothing to do with medicine if there's no empathy in the room. That a stethoscope doesn't automatically come with compassion. I went to that appointment because I was tired. Bone-deep tired that sleep couldn't fix. Tired of the chest pain that woke me at 3 a.m. Tired of the quiet panic of wondering if something was seriously wrong. I practiced what I would say for days. Stood in front of the bathroom mirror rehearsing my symptoms, even rehearsed how to sit, how to breathe, how to make myself smaller so I'd take up less space in his busy schedule. Because I knew, before he even entered the exam room with my chart, that the moment he saw my body, he'd stop listening to my words. I'd become a statistic, not a story. It wasn't the first time. I'd felt that look before, the one that strips you of dignity and calls it medical concern. The one that reduces years of your life into lifestyle choices. I'd been trained since childhood to laugh it off, to say, "Thank you, doctor," when they said, "You really should lose weight," as if politeness could protect me from humiliation. But that day, something shifted. Maybe it was the way his eyes never met mine even when I was crying. Maybe it was the silence that followed when I said, voice breaking, "I just want to feel better." Maybe it was realizing I was 42 years old and still apologizing for taking up space in a medical office where I paid a $50 copay just to be judged. If you've ever felt small in a place meant to heal you, if you've ever left a doctor's office feeling worse than when you walked in, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. These stories matter because they remind us we're not alone in this particular kind of pain. The kind that happens in rooms that smell like antiseptic and broken trust. Because somewhere right now, someone is sitting in a cold exam room, paper gown barely closed, waiting to be seen. Not diagnosed, not measured, not judged, just seen. I was 13 the first time a doctor laughed at my body. Not a full laugh, worse. That contained chuckle that vibrates in the throat, the kind that says, "I shouldn't, but..." It was supposed to be a routine school physical. You know the kind. Height, weight, turn your head and cough. Questions read from a standardized form without looking up. The nurse was young, maybe fresh out of nursing school, with her hair in a perfect ponytail and scrubs covered in cheerful cartoon characters. She smiled when I walked in, warm and genuine. She smiled until the digital scale beeped its verdict. 3 beeps. Beep, beep, beep. Like an alarm, like an accusation. Then her smile faltered. She looked at the number, looked at me, looked away quickly, as if my body had said something obscene that we both had to pretend we didn't hear. She wrote the number on my chart with careful, small handwriting, like if she made the numbers smaller, they'd somehow matter less. The doctor entered the room smelling of coffee, Starbucks, probably a venti something, and impatience. Dr. Richardson. I still remember his name. Funny how trauma etches certain details in permanent marker. He had coffee stains on his white coat and reading glasses pushed up on his head. He didn't ask how I felt, if I was sleeping okay, if anything hurt, if I liked school, if I was happy. He just said, looking at the chart and not at me, "We'll need to keep an eye on this," tapping the number where my weight lived like original sin. My mother nodded from her chair in the corner, embarrassed on my behalf, or maybe for me, or maybe of me. I've never been sure which. I wanted to disappear into the paper gown, to fold myself into something small enough that they'd stop noticing. He asked what I ate, how much I moved, if I ever felt guilty after eating. That was the phrase he used, guilty. I didn't know guilt was a medical question. Didn't know that feeling bad about food was supposed to be normal. I told him I liked drawing, reading books under my covers with a flashlight, writing stories in my journal. Things that made me feel alive, that made the world make sense. He told me I needed more discipline and less sitting around, as if curiosity were a symptom, as if imagination had calories. On the way home, my mother drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. Then she said, "Careful," like she was handling something fragile. "He's just trying to help, honey." I nodded from the back seat, watching suburban houses blur past the window, each one holding its own secrets. But the help felt like humiliation wearing a stethoscope. That night, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, the full-length one my mother had hung there, thinking it would help me be more aware. Tracing my reflection with trembling fingers, I pressed my stomach, my thighs, my cheeks, wondering how something that kept me alive, that let me run and laugh and hug my friends, could make everyone else so uncomfortable. It was the first time I realized the world didn't see me. It measured me, quantified me, reduced me to numbers on a growth chart that determined my worth. And that day, without fully understanding it, I stopped believing doctors were healers. I started believing they were judges in a courtroom where I was always guilty, where my body was the evidence and the crime all at once. I grew up thinking my body was a test I was always failing. Every doctor's appointment, every school nurse visit, every cold tape measure wrapped around my waist confirmed it. I learned the language of apology early, became fluent in self-deprecation. I know I should lose weight. I've been trying, I really have. I'm sorry. Sorry for existing in the wrong shape. Sorry for taking up space. Sorry for needing medical care while fat. Diets became my religion, and I was a devoted worshiper. Each new one promised redemption. Weight Watchers, South Beach, Atkins, keto, paleo, juice cleanses, intermittent fasting. Punishment disguised as wellness. Starvation rebranded as clean eating. Suffering marketed as self-care. Friends joined me at first. We'd sit at lunch in the cafeteria, comparing calorie counts, competing over who could eat less, who could resist more. Bonding over restriction. "Just a salad for me," one would say. "I'm doing black coffee only," another would reply, and I'd lie. "I'm not even hungry." Then they stopped when their scales cooperated and mine didn't. When their bodies responded to starvation the right way and mine just got tired, sick, broken. I stayed behind, praying to numbers that never answered, praying to a scale that moved up and down like my worth was measured in pounds lost or gained. Doctors praised me when I lost weight, even if I was starving, even if my hair was falling out, even if I couldn't concentrate in school. "Good job," they said, without asking how I felt, without looking at anything except that one number dropping. Sickness in the right direction is still sickness, but no one told me that. No one asked if the weight loss was healthy or just loss. I stopped going to appointments unless absolutely necessary. My anxiety began days before each one, rehearsing excuses, imagining the look on their face, the sigh, the cold tone that made me feel 6 inches tall. I'd stand in front of my closet trying on different outfits. Does this one make me look smaller? Will they judge me less in black? Should I wear my hair down to hide my face? Once, when I was 27, a doctor told me, typing without looking at me, "If you just had more willpower, we wouldn't be having this conversation." I smiled and said thank you, because that's how women survive humiliation. Politely. We learn to accept cruelty with grace, to make our humiliators comfortable in our pain. After each visit, I'd promise myself to change, to be better, to earn respect through suffering, to shrink until I was acceptable. But shame doesn't make you lighter. It just makes you quieter. It teaches you to take up less space in conversations, in photographs, in life. Over time, I stopped looking in mirrors. I couldn't face the reflection that reminded me of every diagnosis I didn't deserve, every assumption made about my health based on my appearance. I covered the mirrors in my apartment with towels, avoided store windows, only took photos from the shoulders up and at specific angles. I thought avoiding doctors meant freedom. I thought if they couldn't weigh me, the number would stop mattering. I thought if I didn't hear the diagnosis, I wouldn't be sick. I didn't realize avoidance was also abandonment, self-abandonment. Because the longer I stayed away, the more I forgot that I deserved help too. That my pain mattered even if it came in a body they didn't approve of. And so for years, I became my own doctor. WebMD at 3 a.m., self-diagnosing, self-medicating with hope and denial and internet forums. Anything was better than sitting in that exam room again, being weighed, being judged, being told that every symptom I had would magically disappear if I just lost weight. Years later, 5 years to be exact, I finally went back to a doctor. 5 years of symptoms ignored, pain normalized, fear dressed up as autonomy. My chest had been tightening for weeks. Not like when you exercise, like when something inside is screaming and no one's listening. Breathing felt like swallowing glass. I told myself it was anxiety, work stress. Maybe I just needed to meditate more, do more yoga, buy some essential oils, anything but face the truth that something was wrong. The waiting room at the urgent care clinic was cold and humming with that particular fluorescent buzz that makes everything feel surreal. CNN played on muted TVs in the corner. People scrolled their phones, avoiding eye contact. Posters on the wall showed smiling stock photo families under bold words, "Health starts with discipline," and "Your body is your responsibility." I wanted to leave before they called my name. Wanted to invent an emergency, a phone call, anything that would justify walking out. But my daughter was texting me, "Promise you went? I'm worried." So I stayed, because sometimes love is stronger than fear. The nurse called my name with professional distance. "Step on the scale, please." The please felt mandatory, like, "Have a nice day" from someone who doesn't care if you do. She weighed me twice, as if the scale couldn't believe its own judgment. "Let's try again." She didn't meet my eyes either, like my weight was somehow contagious. She circled the number on my chart in red pen, a red circle that screamed, "Here's the problem. Here's why everything is wrong." The doctor entered without greeting me. Dr. Chen, Mid-50s, wire-rimmed glasses, white coat so crisp it looked painful. He looked at the chart before he looked at me. Actually, he never really looked at me. His eyes moved between the computer screen and the paper in his hand, never toward my face. "Your blood pressure is high," he said with clinical neutrality, like he was reading the weather forecast. "Your cholesterol, too. Your body isn't handling the load." "The load?" I repeated, though I already knew what he meant. "Yes," he replied without pause, without softening. "Your weight. It's affecting everything. Blood pressure, cholesterol, probably your fatigue too." I tried to tell him about the chest pain that woke me at night, the dizziness when I stood up too fast, the irregular heartbeat I could feel in my throat when I was lying still. He waved a hand in dismissal, a gesture that said, "I've heard this before," without saying the words. "Lose 30 pounds. That will fix most of it, maybe all of it." My throat burned with words I couldn't say. But what if it's something else? What if there's more to this? He sighed. That sigh. People always want it to be something else, some mystery diagnosis. But you're too young to be this careless with your health. Careless. The word hit like a slap. Like I'd been reckless with this body instead of carrying it through trauma, through loss, through every day of just surviving. He typed notes without looking up. His computer screen reflected in his glasses, blue light instead of empathy, data instead of care. I left with a prescription for phentermine, diet pills that would make my heart race even more, and a brochure about mindful eating featuring thin white women smiling with salads. No blood tests, no EKG, no stress test, no x-rays. No eye contact that said, "I believe you." In the parking lot, I sat in my car and cried. Not because I was sick, though I was. I cried because I realized I could die, and no one would ever really see me. I'd disappear and leave behind only a number on a scale as my obituary. My daughter called. "How did it go?" I couldn't answer. My throat was too full of tears and rage and exhaustion. "Mom, are you there?" "I'm here," I whispered. But I wasn't sure that was true anymore. I didn't take the pills. I threw them in the trash the next morning, right next to the empty brochure that told me to love myself thinner. What a phrase. Love yourself. As if love required loss. As if caring meant shrinking. For months, I ignored the pain. It came and went like a storm that forgot to leave, that set up residence in my chest and decided to stay. I worked through it, smiled through it, told everyone who asked that I was fine. Just tired. Just stressed. Just getting older. That's the cruelest thing about medical trauma and shame. It teaches you to suffer quietly, so no one ever calls it suffering. So no one ever says you're being dramatic or attention-seeking. I stopped answering calls from the clinic. The automated reminder messages stacked in my inbox like accusations. "You're overdue for your follow-up. This is your final reminder." I was overdue for kindness, for being seen, for medical care that didn't require me to apologize for my body first. My body began to speak louder. Shortness of breath climbing stairs I used to run up, fatigue that wasn't fixed by coffee or sleep, headaches that bloomed behind my eyes without warning. Each symptom was a whisper I kept shoving back down, afraid to listen, afraid of what it might mean to admit something was wrong. Friends told me over brunch, over coffee, over text. "See another doctor." I nodded and changed the subject quickly. "Yeah, I will. I've been meaning to." How could I explain that it wasn't fear of sickness that kept me away? It was fear of being humiliated again. Fear that no matter what was wrong, they'd tell me it was my fault for being fat. Late at night when everyone was asleep, I searched symptoms on WebMD, Mayo Clinic, random medical forums. Every article ended with the same advice: see your doctor immediately. I'd close the laptop like even the screen was mocking me, like even the internet knew I was too broken to fix. Sometimes I'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror at 3 a.m., hand over my heart, feeling the pulse throb unevenly. Fast, then slow, then fast again, skipping beats like a record scratch. I wondered if I was imagining it, if maybe all I needed was to be believed. If one person in a white coat would just listen for 5 minutes without judgment. The pain became my secret. It lived under my clothes, under my smile, under the carefully constructed performance of, I'm fine. And when people said, you look healthy, I said, thank you, because that's what invisible people do. We play along. We perform wellness even when we're dying inside. At work, my coworkers talked about their doctors, their annual physicals, their minor health scares that got resolved quickly. My doctor is amazing, one said. She really listens. I nodded and smiled, keeping my silence like a terminal diagnosis I couldn't share. Another coworker offered me her doctor's number. She's taking new patients. Really thorough. Want me to text you her info? Sure, I lied. That would be great. The number sat in my phone for months, never called. Evidence of my cowardice saved in my contacts. Because trauma isn't just what happened. It's what you stop doing because you're afraid it will happen again. It happened quietly, the way most breakdowns do, like earthquakes that have tremors before the big one, except no one was paying attention to the warning signs. It was a Tuesday, ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of day you forget by Wednesday. One morning I woke up gasping, the air too thin for my lungs, my chest wrapped in bands of steel that tightened with each attempt to breathe. The room spun, the ceiling fan blurred. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips, my teeth, my vision. I thought it was another panic attack, my mind playing tricks again, anxiety manifesting as physical symptoms. Just breathe, I whispered. Count to 10, it will pass. But the dizziness didn't fade. My vision tunneled. A ringing filled my ears like someone was holding a bell right next to my head. And suddenly I was on the bathroom floor, holding the sink, the cold tile pressing against my cheek. Please not today, I whispered to no one. I have meetings. I have deadlines. I can't do this today. My daughter found me an hour later. She'd stayed home sick from college. A cold, she thought. Nothing serious. She opened my bedroom door looking for cold medicine and found me instead. Mom! Her voice sounded far away even though she was right there. Mom, you need a hospital. The word hospital tasted bitter, like medicine you're forced to swallow. I shook my head. I'll be fine. Just help me to bed. You're not fine. She was crying now, phone already in her hand. You're gray. Your lips are blue. I'm calling 911. No, I tried to say, but she didn't listen. For once, I was grateful someone didn't listen to me. The emergency room smelled like metal and waiting and fear compressed into antiseptic. Nurses moved around like ghosts in sneakers, efficient and distant. The sounds were overwhelming. Beeping monitors, overhead pages for doctors, someone crying behind a curtain, the constant buzz of fluorescent lights. I held my chest and prayed silently to be treated like a person, not a problem. To be believed. Just this once, to be believed. When the ER doctor arrived, his tone was sharp, efficient, checked out. Probably his third double shift this week. High blood pressure, likely lifestyle related. He said it as if my pain were a choice I'd made that morning. It's not just that, I whispered, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. It's been happening for months. The chest pain, the irregular heartbeat. He nodded while typing, his fingers moving across the keyboard without pause. We'll run some tests. But his eyes stayed on the monitor, never on me, never actually seeing me. The machines beeped their mechanical symphony. The lights hummed overhead. And I realized how alone you can feel surrounded by people whose job is literally to care. They ran blood tests, an EKG, a chest X-ray. Hours passed in that liminal space between sick and diagnosed. My daughter held my hand the whole time, her fingers cold and tight around mine. "You're going to be okay," she kept saying. I wasn't sure which of us she was trying to convince. When the results came back, the doctor's face changed, just slightly, enough that I knew before he spoke. "You have early-stage heart disease, ventricular arrhythmia. You're at significant risk for cardiac event." The words landed like stones in water, rippling out into every part of my understanding of myself. "You're lucky we caught it when we did," he said, like luck had anything to do with 5 years of ignored symptoms. Like luck was the same as good care. They gave me real pills this time, not diet pills, beta blockers, blood thinners, pamphlets about cardiac rehabilitation, not about meal plans. But not one person asked why I'd waited so long to come. Why a woman in her 40s had ignored chest pain for months. What had kept me away from medical care that could have saved me years ago. No one asked about the trauma that lives in exam rooms, the medical gaslighting that makes you doubt your own body, the shame that kills as surely as disease. On the ride home, my daughter drove my car with shaking hands while I stared out the window. The city looked different somehow, sharper, more real. I thought, maybe if someone had looked me in the eyes sooner, I wouldn't have been so afraid to be seen. Maybe this body wouldn't be a battlefield, just a house that needed repairs. A week later, my insurance assigned me to a new doctor for cardiac follow-up, Dr. Patricia Morrison. I almost didn't go. Trauma has a very specific way of teaching you to cancel hope before it disappoints you. The night before the appointment, I didn't sleep. Just lay there counting ceiling tiles, rehearsing what I'd say, preparing for the worst. She was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with kind eyes and laugh lines that suggested she smiled more than she frowned. Her stethoscope had a small rainbow pin attached to it. She didn't start with my chart. She started with my name. "Hi, I'm Dr. Morrison, but you can call me Patricia if you're comfortable with that." She sat down on the rolling stool, putting herself at eye level with me. "Tell me what's been happening. Not what brings you in, not what's the problem. Just tell me what's been happening. Like I was a person with a story, not a case with symptoms." She folded her hands in her lap and looked at me. Actually looked, made eye contact, waited. And something in me broke open. I told her everything. Not just about the chest pain and the collapse, but about the years of silence, the doctors who sighed, the appointments I canceled, the weight of trying to exist in a body that medical professionals had taught me to hate. I told her about being 13 and laughed at. About diet pills prescribed instead of diagnostics. About the 5 years I stayed away because fear of humiliation was stronger than fear of death. I waited for the familiar responses. The, "but your weight is a factor." The, "you need to take responsibility." The subtle shift in tone that turns care into judgment. Instead, she said quietly, "I'm so sorry that happened to you. That must have been incredibly hard." 5 words. That must have been incredibly hard. No doctor had ever said anything like that to me. Not in 30 years of medical appointments, weight loss lectures, and blood pressure checks that came with side orders of shame. The words cracked something in me I didn't know was waiting to break. I started crying, not delicate tears, but the ugly kind that comes from places you've kept locked. She didn't rush me, didn't hand me a tissue and change the subject. Just sat there, present, while I cried years of suppressed grief into that small exam room. When I could speak again, she explained what the test showed. But she did it carefully, pausing to make sure I understood, drawing diagrams on the paper covering the exam table, asking if I had questions. "Your heart has been under stress," she said. "Chronic stress, probably for years. Your body's been in survival mode for a long time. That takes a toll regardless of weight." Regardless of weight. I'd never heard a doctor say that before. "Yes, body weight can be a factor in cardiac health," she continued. "But it's not the only factor. It's not even always the primary factor. Stress, genetics, inflammation, sleep patterns, trauma, all of these matter. And right now, managing your heart condition is the priority, not a number on a scale." She ran real tests, ordered a full cardiac workup, thyroid panel, inflammatory markers, sleep study referral. She explained what each test would tell us and why it mattered. "Your body hasn't failed you," she said at the end of the appointment, her hand briefly touching my shoulder. "Your body has been protecting you the only way it knows how, under incredibly difficult circumstances. Now we're going to help it." I felt something I hadn't felt in a medical office since I was a child. Safe. Before I left, she wrote something on a prescription pad and handed it to me. Not medicine, just words in her careful handwriting. "You are more than a number. You deserve comprehensive, compassionate care. Don't settle for less." I folded it carefully and put it in my wallet like a talisman. Like proof that somewhere in this broken system, there were still healers who remembered what healing meant. That night, I taped a copy of it to my bathroom mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch at my reflection, because kindness, when it finally arrives after years of cruelty, doesn't need to fix you. It just needs to see you. And being seen, really seen, is its own kind of medicine. Healing didn't happen overnight. It started quietly, in moments that used to pass unnoticed. Brushing my hair without self-hatred, taking a breath without guilt, looking in the mirror without immediate apology. The note from Dr. Morrison stayed taped to my mirror. "You are more than a number." I read it every morning like a prayer, like a reminder, like medicine I took before coffee. Sometimes, I still heard echoes of the old voices, the sighs, the judgments, the words that tried to make my body shrink. Dr. Richardson's chuckle, Dr. Chen's dismissal, years of accumulated cruelty. But now I could tell the difference between their voices and mine, could separate what was true from what was trauma. I began to keep a journal, not about food or exercise or weight, about feelings. Today I feel tired. Today I feel hopeful. Today I'm scared, but I'm trying. For the first time, my body and my heart were writing the same story. Not war, truce, maybe eventually, peace. My daughter noticed the change before I did. "You smile different now, Mom," she said one night while we were watching TV. "Like you actually mean it this time." I started walking in the mornings, not to burn calories or lose weight, just to breathe, to feel my body move without it being punishment. The world looked softer when movement wasn't attached to shame. The sunrise was just a sunrise. My body was just a body. Walking was just walking. Sometimes I passed the urgent care where Dr. Chen had dismissed me. My heart would quicken for a moment. Muscle memory of humiliation, trauma stored in tissue. But I didn't look away anymore. Didn't cross the street to avoid it. Because you can't heal what you refuse to face. I made myself walk past that building once a week. A little exposure therapy I invented for myself. Each time it got slightly easier. The building became just a building. Its power over me diminished with each passing. My reflection stopped being an enemy I had to defeat. I stopped asking it to change, started asking it how it felt, started treating my own image like I'd treat a friend. "How are you today?" I'd ask the mirror. Sometimes the answer was tired, sometimes scared, sometimes increasingly, okay. The body I once feared had become evidence of survival, a living record of everything I endured and everything I refused to give up. The scars where IVs had been, the faint marks from the EKG electrodes, the lines on my face that told stories of laughter and crying and living. All of it was testimony, proof that I was still here. And for the first time in decades, when I looked in the mirror, I saw something stronger than shame. I saw a survivor. I saw proof that even broken systems couldn't completely break me. It started with a text message. My best friend, Sarah. You seem different lately. Good different. What changed? I stared at my phone for a long time before responding. I stopped hiding, I finally typed. I stopped pretending. Pretending what? That I'm fine. That medical trauma isn't real. That my body deserves the treatment it's gotten. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, tell me more. So I did. I told her everything. And she told me her story. And suddenly we were both crying over FaceTime, sharing traumas we'd both been carrying alone. That conversation changed something, made me realize that if Sarah had been silently suffering too, how many others were out there. I started sharing small pieces of my story on social media. Nothing dramatic at first. Just honest fragments about fear, doctors, silence, the long journey back to trusting my body. Had my follow-up with my cardiologist today? She looked me in the eyes. It shouldn't feel revolutionary, but it does. I thought maybe a few friends would like it. Maybe someone would comment with a heart emoji. I wasn't prepared for what happened. The responses came like a flood. This happened to me. I stopped going to doctors for 3 years because of this. I thought I was the only one who felt this way. My doctor told me my knee pain was from weight. It was a torn ligament. I waited 2 years. Their words filled the space that used to echo with loneliness. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of people sharing identical trauma in different exam rooms with different doctors in different cities. But the same script, the same sigh, the same refusal to see. I wasn't shouting into the void anymore. I was part of a chorus I didn't know existed. One afternoon, I filmed a short video. No makeup, no filter, hair in a messy bun, wearing my favorite hoodie. Just me and that note from Dr. Morrison visible on the mirror behind me. If a doctor ever made you feel small, I said to the camera, voice steady but hands shaking, remember, you're not the problem. The system is broken, not you. Your pain is real. Your experience is valid, and you deserve to be seen, heard, and believed. Full stop. No conditions attached. I almost didn't post it, hovered over the delete button for 5 minutes, then hit share and closed the app, afraid to see if anyone cared. By the next morning, thousands of people had watched it. The comments section was a river of shared trauma. I'm crying. Thank you for saying this. I'm booking an appointment I've been avoiding for months. Women shared stories of misdiagnosed endometriosis, ignored heart attacks, dismissed chronic pain, all because doctors saw their weight before they saw their symptoms. Men shared too, less often, more quietly, but there. Talking about eating disorders in larger bodies that no one took seriously because men don't get those, and you don't look like you're starving. Trans and non-binary people shared stories of being denied care entirely, of doctors who couldn't see past one aspect of their identity to treat their actual medical needs. That's when I realized my voice had come back. Not loud and angry, though I had every right to that, but steady, clear, the kind that doesn't need to scream because it knows people are already listening. I started making more videos about preparing for medical appointments when you have trauma, about what to say when a doctor interrupts you, about finding size-friendly providers, about advocating for yourself in a system designed to dismiss you. Every video ended the same way. Please like and subscribe. Not for me, but for the people who still think their pain doesn't matter. For everyone still sitting in a waiting room, terrified to be seen. Because every click, every comment, every share was more than social media engagement. It was proof that silence can be unlearned, that stories told out loud have power. Doctors started following me too, not to criticize, to learn. "I'm a family medicine resident," one wrote. "Your video made me realize how often I do this without thinking. Thank you for calling us in." Medical students messaged, asking if they could share my videos in their classes. "We want to do better," they said. "We want to remember what we're forgetting." A nursing professor asked permission to include my story in her curriculum. They need to understand that trauma-informed care isn't optional, it's essential. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving the medical system. I was helping change it. One video, one story, one person at a time. It had been 2 years since the collapse when the email arrived. Subject line: Speaker invitation, Patient Perspectives panel. The hospital where I'd been treated wanted me to speak to their staff about patient experience, about what they could do better, about the gap between care and compassion. My first instinct was to decline, to say I was busy, not qualified, not interested in reliving trauma for their professional development. But then I thought about all the messages I'd received. All the people who said, "Your story gave me courage." All the women still sitting in exam rooms, afraid. I accepted. Not for them, for us. The conference room was packed when I arrived. Doctors, nurses, physician assistants, medical assistants, administrative staff. Some looked curious, others defensive. A few looked tired, like they already knew what I was going to say. I stood at the front with my laptop, my prepared slides, my carefully rehearsed speech. But when I opened my mouth, everything I'd planned disappeared. "You've seen thousands of bodies in your careers," I began, my voice quieter than I'd intended. "But how many faces do you remember?" The room went still. Someone coughed. A phone buzzed somewhere and was quickly silenced. "I'm going to tell you about a number, 347. That's how many times my medical records mention my weight. Do you know how many times they mention my name? 26. And most of those are just demographic headers." I clicked to the next slide, a screenshot of my actual medical records with identifying information blocked out. Just page after page of BMI calculations, weight trends, dietary recommendations. I was a data point before I was a person, a problem before I was a patient. I told them about being 13 and laughed at, about diet pills prescribed instead of diagnostics, about 5 years of ignored chest pain because I learned that seeking help meant seeking humiliation. "I almost died," I said, and my voice cracked for the first time. Not from my heart condition, from the fear of being seen, from medical trauma so deep that death felt safer than facing another doctor. Some people were crying now. Others sat rigid, arms crossed, faces closed. And a few were nodding, recognizing something in my story. "I didn't come here to blame you individually," I continued. "I came because I survived a system that almost killed me, and I don't want anyone else to barely survive what should be survivable care." I talked about Dr. Morrison, about what changed when someone finally saw me as human, about how one appointment with empathy did more for my health than years of weight loss recommendations. "The cure wasn't in the prescription," I said. "It was in the eye contact, in being believed, in being treated like my pain mattered even though my body didn't meet your standards." When I finished, there was silence. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that comes before something shifts. Then a woman stood up. A doctor, older, with gray hair and tired eyes. "I'm Dr. Reeves. I've been practicing for 30 years, and She paused, voice thick. I've done exactly what you described. To how many patients, I don't know, but I'm sorry, and I'm going to do better. Others spoke up. A nurse who admitted she'd avoided eye contact with larger patients because she didn't know what to say. A physician assistant who realized he'd been prescribing weight loss like a cure-all without actually listening. The head of the hospital stood and asked if I'd be willing to help develop training protocols. We need to fix this, he said, and we can't do it without voices like yours. After the formal session ended, people came up to me one by one. Some to apologize, some to thank me. Some just to shake my hand, silently acknowledging something that didn't fit in words. A young resident approached last, eyes red. My mom died of a heart attack at 52. She stopped going to the doctor because of experiences like yours. If someone had listened to her, she couldn't finish. I hugged her while she cried. Two strangers connected by the same broken system, the same preventable loss. As I left the hospital that day, I passed the emergency room entrance where I'd arrived by ambulance 2 years before, where I thought I was dying, where, in a way, I was reborn. The building looked different now. Or maybe I looked different. Maybe both. I'd walked in as someone who barely survived the system. I walked out as someone helping to change it. 6 months after that presentation, I received another email, this time from a medical school 3 states away. They wanted me to be part of their new curriculum on patient-centered care. Then another invitation, and another. Teaching hospitals, nursing programs, conferences on healthcare equity. My story, my trauma, my survival. It was becoming medicine in itself. Not the kind in prescription bottles, but the kind that changes how care is given. I developed a workshop called The Cost of Not Being Seen. In it, I walk healthcare providers through what it feels like to be a patient in a body that medicine has decided is wrong. I show them the research, how implicit bias affects diagnoses, how weight stigma increases health risks, how medical trauma keeps people from seeking care until it's almost too late. But mostly, I tell stories, mine and others. Because data doesn't change hearts, stories do. I tell them about Maria, who had ovarian cancer dismissed as just obesity for 2 years. By the time someone actually examined her, it was stage 4. About James, a veteran with PTSD whose very real cardiac symptoms were attributed to his weight for months. He had 3 blocked arteries. About Sam, a non-binary person denied gender-affirming care because their doctor insisted they needed to focus on weight loss first. They attempted suicide twice before finding affirming care. These stories pile up like bodies, casualties of a system that measures worth in pounds. Sometimes after my presentations, doctors approach me with their own stories, whispered confessions of times they didn't listen, didn't look, didn't see. I had a patient 10 years ago, one told me. She kept coming in with abdominal pain. I kept telling her to lose weight. She stopped coming. I found out later she died of colon cancer. The guilt in healthcare is real too. Providers who were trained in a broken system, who were taught that weight is always the problem, who learned to see bodies instead of people. My work isn't about blame. It's about change, about acknowledging harm so we can stop repeating it. Dr. Morrison and I have stayed in touch. She helped me develop some of the training materials, contributed her perspective as a provider who gets it. I learned this stuff, she told me over coffee once. The weight bias, the shortcuts, the assumptions. I had to unlearn it, actively, constantly. It doesn't happen by accident. She's right. Change doesn't happen by accident. It happens when people who have been harmed find their voices, when people in power choose to listen, when both sides decide that doing better matters more than being comfortable. My daughter came to one of my presentations, sat in the back and cried through the whole thing. Afterward, she told me, "I didn't realize how close I came to losing you. Not just to the heart thing, to giving up. "You saved me," I told her. "That day you found me, called 911, refused to let me wave it away. You saved my life. And now you're saving others," she said. "I don't know about that, but I know I'm trying. Trying to make it so no one else has to choose between their dignity and their health, between being seen and being safe. The work is exhausting. Some days I want to stop, to just focus on my own healing, to let someone else carry this weight. But then I get another message, another story, another person saying, 'I went to the doctor for the first time in 5 years because of your video, and I keep going.' He never looked me in the eyes. That first doctor, the one who turned my body into data and my pain into fault. But others did, eventually. And that changed everything. I used to think healing meant being fixed, having the right weight, the right numbers, the right body that medicine could finally approve of. Now I know healing means being seen, fully honestly, without flinching or fixing or trying to make yourself smaller. My body carries the fingerprints of every word that ever tried to shrink it, the echoes of every sigh, every dismissal, every time I apologized for taking up space. But it also carries proof that I'm still here, still breathing, still fighting, still refusing to disappear just because it would make others comfortable. Sometimes I still feel that old fear when I step into a medical office, the echo of scales and charts and clipped sentences, the memory of being measured instead of seen. But then I remember, I am not here to please. I am not here to be easy. I am here to live, fully, loudly, in this body that has earned every inch of space it takes. The cure was never in the prescription. It was in the moment someone finally met my eyes and saw a person, not a project, a human, not a problem, a whole life, not just a weight. If you're still waiting for someone to look at you that way, let this story find you. Let it remind you that you're not alone, not crazy, not too sensitive. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe. Not for me, not for the algorithm, but for the faces still turned away, for everyone still sitting in paper gowns, waiting to be believed. Every click is a whisper saying, "I see you, I believe you, your pain matters." Because medicine without empathy is just math. And math never saved a heartbeat. Numbers never mended what shame broke. I no longer fear the exam room. I no longer hide behind polite smiles or apologetic postures. My eyes meet theirs now, steady, unbroken, unashamed, alive. I've learned that the weight we carry isn't always physical. Sometimes it's the accumulation of every time we were told we were too much, not enough, wrong, broken, undeserving. And the real work of healing isn't losing that weight. It's learning to put it down, to stop carrying shame that was never ours to begin with. The day that doctor refused to see me was the day I started learning to see myself, not as a problem, not as a project, but as a person deserving of care, kindness, and comprehensive medical treatment regardless of my size. And that lesson, that simple, radical act of self-seeing, has been the beginning of everything. This was my story. The story of a woman who almost died not from disease, but from a healthcare system that taught her she didn't deserve care unless she changed who she was. Not all stories have perfect endings. Mine doesn't either. I still have difficult appointments, still encounter doctors who see my weight before they see my symptoms. But now I have tools, I have language, I have community. I have the absolute certainty that my experience isn't just valid, it's necessary. If you're struggling with medical trauma right now, if you're avoiding appointments because fear feels safer than facing judgment, if a doctor ever made you feel less than human, listen to me. Your body is not the problem. The system is broken, not you. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard. You deserve medical care that doesn't come wrapped in shame or conditions or demands to change before you're worthy of treatment. Doctors who practice with empathy exist. I found one. Thousands of people in my community have found them. They're out there. Keep looking. You're worth the search. And if the first one fails, find another. And another. Because your health, your whole health, physical and emotional, is worth every difficult phone call, every new patient appointment, every time you have to start over. Don't let medical trauma steal years of your life like it almost stole mine. Your pain is real. Your experience is valid. You deserve to take up space in exam rooms without apologizing first. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And if you recognized yourself anywhere in this narrative, I see you. I believe you. You're not alone. The heaviest weight isn't the one on the scale. It's the weight of carrying trauma someone else caused, of living with pain someone else dismissed, of surviving in a system that was supposed to heal you. But that weight, like any other, can be set down. One appointment at a time, one boundary at a time, one moment of refusing to shrink at a time, until finally, when you look in the mirror, you see what you should have seen all along: a survivor, a whole person, someone who deserves every bit of care, compassion, and comprehensive medical treatment. Someone who is and has always been more than a number. See you in the next story. And remember, these stories weigh heavy, but they don't have to sink us. Not anymore.